I want to welcome Jeff Benedict to this bonus cut of the Seth Davis Show. He is the co-author of what is now, Jeff, I can proudly say, a New York Times bestseller. It's called The System. It is the glory and scandal of big-time college football, co-authored with Armen Keteyian, who's a longtime investigative reporter. Very fascinating chapter that I know that you were the point person on. That's a chapter called The Closer, in which you spoke with a young woman who worked as a hostess at the University of Tennessee and was kind of really at the center, the eye of the storm, when the NCAA investigated whether there were violations over this hostess program. You have, I want to say there were 20 female students who were part of this program, and you really pull back the curtain on that as far as how many women were applying, the fact that they were told how to dress, how to wear their hair. Here's my question. Why do these programs even exist? Even if everything is on the up and up, I find it very demeaning. If I had a daughter, it's just amazing to me that in the year 2013, forget about passing a rule against it. I'm talking about if Mike's Live could get together all of his schools and say, you know what, this is unseemly, this is inappropriate, it's compromising us in a variety of ways, and we're just not going to have these hostess programs anymore. You pointed out they've been around since Bear Bryant.
Yeah. Honestly, you know what, Seth? I tell you the truth. Confession is, I didn't know much about hostess programs when we started this book. I mean, I really didn't. Call me naive. I didn't know a whole lot about it. So I was pretty fascinated by this as we started digging in. And I mean, I agree with you. There are some elements of college football that they are old school in terms of thought process and stuff. And I think there are some elements of this that are demeaning, which is why some of the hostesses we talked to, including one that Armen did some great interviews with, who said, you know, after growing up her whole life wanting to be one, once she got to be one and saw what it was really like, didn't want to be one because it was demeaning and embarrassing and potentially humiliating. And so there are schools that don't have them, but there's a lot of schools that still do. And unfortunately, it's an old school attitude that you throw up these very beautiful, sexually attractive girls as one more form of bait to get a player to come to their school, not really thinking about what this really means and frankly, the really bad message it sends. Because to me, there's a connection between hostesses and what happens later in the book to a tutor who gets sexually assaulted. I think when you take a 17-year-old high school kid and you bring them to campus and you let them go on a date with a beautiful woman, not a kid, a woman, between 17 and 21, that's a huge gap at that point in your life. You know, when you're 40 and 44, that doesn't mean much. But 17 to 21 is a huge difference. And you're basically telling these guys in pretty clear terms that if you come here, this is what you get if you come. And they get there, and in fact, they do start getting some of that stuff. And it warps their perception of women and what's appropriate. And so you get into situations where guys are in the tutoring center and they think they can just do whatever they want with some of these girls. Now, granted, there's some tutors there, unfortunately, that allow them to do that. But there's a lot of them that are there just because they're trying to make money and get themselves through school. And the story we told at Missouri was one of those kind of tutors, and she ended up being a victim of a sex crime.
Well, again, I'll reiterate. I'm not even calling for any rule to be passed here. I'm asking for common sense and common decency to rule the day. Conference commissioners and university presidents need to bring an end to these hostess programs, in my very, very humble opinion. Last question for you, Jeff. I mean, there's so much going on with the dialogue around college athletics and college football in particular. It's hard to even know where to begin. You have this governance change that's probably going to happen. People talking about pay for play. The marketing model, the O'Bannon case, recruiting. The floor is yours. What is the biggest challenge facing college athletics, and what do you think is kind of the next stage, the next phase of this whole dialogue?
Well, I think where it's moving, there's so many moving parts, and as Armen has said, it's a fast-moving train, and it doesn't appear to have a conductor. But I think that what everyone's focusing on now more and more, and rightfully so, is the proper compensation of college football players. I think it's time that we stop looking at college football players like the rest of college athletes. People are not spending millions of dollars and tuning in on Saturday to watch people walk across a balance beam. You know, gymnastics, golf, tennis, all those college sports are in a different category than football, in my opinion. And I know how people feel about, because of Title IX, you could never pay play. Look, college football should be isolated. It should be different. It is different. The fact is, it's a totally different thing, and it generates way more money. And the other thing is, these guys, when they leave, 99% of them, more than that, are never going to earn a career in this playing football, but they'll live with the injuries from playing college football for the rest of their lives. And so there's no reason why they can't come up with a common sense approach to properly take care of these kids after they play and to compensate them more appropriately while they play. You can't have coaches driving into the practice lot in Beamers and in Mercedes-Benz, and when you have players who are sneaking off to Walmart on Saturday night to steal food because they don't have enough money to buy a meal. That's just ridiculous. And as long as and I think most people realize that, and I think where the direction is now is it's going to change. I mean, I don't know how it's going to change, but I think it's inevitable that that's going to change.
Well, I think maybe the first change is probably needs to be organized and structured differently to bring about those changes. Listen, Jeff, thanks for being on the show. The book is called The System. I read it. I underlined it. It's a fascinating. I look at it as a textbook that I read for pleasure. And I think that obviously a lot of people are feeling the same way, which is why it's a bestseller. So best of luck with all the book sales. And thanks for being on the show. I look forward to being with you soon.
Thank you, Seth. It was a privilege.